Isaiah Hull breaking down the Wolverines for us. You can catch his work on Wolverines Wire. On Wolverines is the podcast, and right here on YouTube, Isaiah Hull. Just look it up and Wolverines Wire. How about the infiltration into the Buckeye State? So I looked at Jim Harbaugh's recruiting classes since he made it to Michigan, and all of his Ohio signees were ranked between 10th and 25th in the state of Ohio up until this year. Ohio State is generally locked in on this top 7 or 8 players in the state, and then generally don't have anything to do with the rest of the guys. And they go off to Michigan State and Kentucky and wherever else. But to get a Jordan Marshall and then the edge rusher out of Fitch High School in Youngstown, Brian Robinson, I believe is his name, to make that kind of, and then my warning to Ohio State fans was when Michigan comes into Ohio and grabs 2 interior offensive linemen that are ranked, let's say 14th or 15th in the state, even though those are typically Ohio State cast-offs. Why should they be Ohio State cast-offs if Michigan is developing these offensive lines into Joe Moore Award winners? Then if they're taking those offensive linemen from your state, then you better probably be landing offers from those same guys.
Well, I think that's the big question, right? And that's the same question that Ian Moore, the Ohio State commit out of Indiana, offensive line commit, was asking on Twitter as he got in a little bit of a Twitter war with some of the Michigan linemen. I think that the Ohio State fans would be quick to point out that of all of the Ohio commits, Ohio State only has offered one of them. That's Jordan Marshall. But that Jordan Marshall commit was really big, right? Because that was a shot over the bow. I mean, he was, by kind of all accounts, the top running back in Ohio State's board. I mean, they're faring all right? They got the James Peoples out of San Antonio, Texas, so it's not like they're missing out. But I mean, to lose a guy that everyone thought was obviously a shoo-in to come to Columbus and ends up heading to Michigan and has the offer, is coveted by Ohio State. I mean, that's just kind of unheard of. So I think that was when people started to kind of sit up a little bit. But when you look at a Ben Roebuck or a Luke Hamilton, what I constantly hear from the Ohio State fans in my mention is these guys don't have Ohio State offers. Well, maybe Ohio State should have offered, because if Michigan wants them, Michigan has been very picky and choosy about the linemen they bring in. And like you just alluded to, they've had 2 straight Joe Moore Award winning offensive lines. I mean, and I think that you're seeing a little bit of a different strategy with Ohio. Now, they haven't gotten Brian Robinson yet. They're fighting Kentucky for him. Another guy who doesn't have an Ohio State offer, but again, is one of the top players in the state. I believe he's 5th in the state. And they're still in it for maybe not as much for Dylan West, but it sounds like Aaron Scott is certainly on the table for them. If they can get those 2 guys, I mean, they'll have 3 of the top 5 guys in the state of Ohio. That's the type of thing that we used to maybe see with Ohio State going into the state of Michigan, right? Is going and picking and choosing who they might want in that sense. I think what it started with for Jim Harbaugh was getting guys like Eric All and Rod Moore. And, Eric All obviously departed for Iowa, but Rod Moore, as Jim Harbaugh said, it's like, yeah, he was a 3-star. He didn't have all these big time offers, but I looked at him and I saw a guy that if he was young and if he played for another year, he'd be a 5-star. He's that good. And you're seeing it on the field. He's Michigan's probably 2nd best defensive back behind Will Johnson, who is a 5-star. So I think that a little bit of just recognition and development goes a long way. And then you add in, the added fuel. If you're a guy like Rod Moore or some of these guys that they're just bringing in, like Cam Calhoun or DeJuan Waller, or they brought in a couple guys late cycle last year, and then now they're just kind of continuing that. And I think what that does is it creates a culture and a mentality, because what Michigan had been long lacking in the Ohio State rivalry was kind of a want to. And I know that there's probably a lot of Michigan guys that would sit there, and especially inside the program, that would tell me that I'm wrong. I've been told that before. I remember in 2019, I approached some Michigan personnel after talking to some of the Ohio State players at Big Ten Media Days. And it was just very clear to me, Ohio State really wanted to beat Michigan way more than Michigan wanted to beat Ohio State. You know, they're talking about all these different things that were very like Manchurian Candidate style, like programming that happened in the offseason. So that when they saw Michigan on the field, it was like all of a sudden they were activated and were going out there and out for blood. And I think that played a big difference. And when I talked to Michigan people, they were like, well, they can do what they do and we'll do what we do. And that what Michigan was doing wasn't working. Suddenly Michigan had a mentality shift in after the 2020 season. And it wasn't just singularly about Ohio State, but started taking Ohio State a lot more seriously. And I think that the way that you kind of keep that going to some degree, because eventually these players who had that chip on their shoulder and were tired of being the doormat to Ohio State and the Buckeyes and all that, I think that they eventually will obviously move out of the building. And the way that you kind of keep that going is having those players that they feel like they're overlooked and they are far enough along now in their recruitment. If Ohio State comes calling a Luke Hamilton or a Ben Roebuck, chances are they're not going to flip because they've established like these relationships with everyone else that is part of this commitment class, this recruiting class, that they want to be a part of it. And so I think it's a smart strategy by Jim Harbaugh. And I think that you're seeing that even down the road with some of these other guys. Now, I don't know that they'll get like a quarterback like Ryan Montgomery, right? Like he's an Ohio 5-star, but Michigan also has a 5-star quarterback in their backyard and Bryce Underwood. And so I think that it'll be interesting to see how 2025 plays out because of things like this. And because it becomes a little bit more geographically balanced, I think, in some ways, just due to some of the guys that are in Michigan. But Michigan's at least setting the stage for we can go down into your state and we can get some of the guys that we want. And while it might, a lot of these guys don't have the Ohio State offers, that's how it starts, right? Because you start getting guys that can come out of the state of Ohio, go play at Michigan, and then if they have some success, then their high school teammates see that and they say, I wasn't really considering Michigan, but look at how well that guy was doing. And then those relationships expand. And suddenly Michigan, especially if it keeps beating Ohio State the way it has the last 2 years, then suddenly it just changes everything. Because what was the big thing with Jim Tressel? It was looking at a fact that Michigan had a Desmond Howard and Charles Woodson and said, we're not doing that. We're going to do in the state of Ohio the same thing that Howard Schellenberger did at Miami. We're building a wall around this state, and you're not going to get those guys anymore. And if Ryan Day doesn't want to offer some of these guys who are, honestly ranked about the same as the guys that they got in, then that's on them. I mean, obviously they got the Armstrong twins and they're from Ohio and that works out well for them. But if you want to dip into Indiana and get an Ian Moore rather than bringing home a Luke Hamilton, then that's your prerogative. But be wary of the fact that it could have some really big dividends for Michigan in the future.
Yeah, I was always fascinated how Ohio State stayed hyper focused and paranoid about Michigan, because typically that's difficult to do and to sell to players when you beat a particular program year after year after year. You're usually paranoid and hyper focused on whoever's above you, not that you can maintain this just singular focus where everything in the building says Michigan this and Michigan that and countdown to the game, and you can keep that up and you're recruiting players from California and all over the place and you're selling this to them. And how they were able to maintain that is obviously a credit to Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer. I also thought, wow. And there was a talent gap there at various degrees. Sometimes it was fairly decided, of course, substantial, and other times it wasn't quite as much. But I also thought at some point, if Michigan gets its act together and they punch Ohio State in the mouth, then that's kind of just a wake-up call to, oh, things have changed. And obviously that happened in 2021. And we've seen the results of it.